this episode on again?
Chile.
Chile. Did you know that Chile's named after the chili pepper?
Really?
Probably not. Today we'll be talking about Chile. Chile is a very long country found in South America. It goes all the way down. So if you go up to the top of the country, it's mostly just deserts. And this was pretty bad for the Incas, who tried to send their people down there, but because there wasn't many natural resources and stuff like that, not a lot of people ended up living there for the longest time. And even as you go more south, it's mountainous and stuff, so all around, Chile's not necessarily a good place to be. But the King of Spain at the time, he didn't really know this. So the King of Spain sends his guy, Francisco Pizarro, to go scope out Chile. And he's like, yo, Francisco, buddy, pal, you a good guy. I need you to go to Chile and find out what's happening, alright? So in the 1530s, Pizarro, he gets to Chile, and he goes mining for gold, and he's like, yo, there's no gold here. There's nothing here. This place is useless. I'm going back to Spain. So Pizarro goes back to Spain, and there's a big old civil war. And in that civil war, Pizarro actually ends up dying. So it's kind of the end of him. But the King of Spain doesn't necessarily give up right then. So 10 years later, in the 1540s, he sends in another group, which is actually able to establish a colony. And this colony is actually pretty okay with their rulers. Things are going well. But for the next 300 years, they still did have to fight off native tribes. And as time goes on, this Chilean colony actually ends up becoming a cattle farming with 300 rich families and the Catholic Church at its head. And as time goes on, Spain keeps squeezing more and more out of its poor citizens, causing strife. So during this time, Napoleon's brother actually becomes the King of France through conquest. And 10 years after this happens, we see two guys enter the scene, Bernardo O'Higgins and Jose San Martin. And these two guys, they start working together. They're talking to each other, and they think to themselves, hey, why do we have to deal with these Spanish rulers? Yeah, they're making us poor and having to pay money and putting us in cow costumes. I've had enough of it. So in 1818, after a whole bunch of fighting, they actually achieved their independence. But there isn't actually much social change. The Catholic Church still rules everything, and there's still a whole bunch of rich families. And a lot of people were poor. And the new government set up by these two actually didn't do all that much different than the Spanish. There's still a whole bunch of poor people were uneducated, and they had terrible housing, which actually breaks two of the human rights. That's two human rights violations for them. Articles 26 and 25. Flash forward to 1958, where we see a big change in the Chilean politics. We got this guy, Salvador Allende, who's a socialist, and he ends up losing to Jorge Alessandri for the Independent Party.
Wait. If Allende is a socialist, but he lost, why does this matter?
It shows a big change in the politics. Now the Socialist Party is gaining steam, which is why in the 1970 election we got Richard Nixon, who supports this guy running for the Democratic Christian Party. And he, in 1970, ends up losing to Allende, which is a big deal because Allende's socialist. And at this time, you know, America, they were not a fan of socialists. It was bad guys. So in the 1970s, this new guy takes the scene. His name is Pinochet. He's a bad guy in this whole thing. So he takes control in a military coup. And this dude is bad. He's like torturing people and killing people. It's going down in Chile. It is not a good place to be. And this guy, Kissinger, he finds out about all this. And he's like, well, he doesn't really say anything. I mean, that's why he's important, is because he just covers it all up, so that no one finds out. Now, as for the Chileans, they couldn't actually do all that much to stop this Pinochet guy. It actually reminds me of this another human rights violations. He violated Article 23 of the Human Rights, in which people have the right to unionize. There was this group of miners in this city, and he gathered it, and they started a strike, and he gathered them all together, and he had his army. He shot them all. He gathered like 6,000 people, women, children. It's bad. He was a bad guy. He's not. Now I'm sad. So Argentina sees this all going down, and they're like, "Yo, Pinochet, what are you doing? You got to stop with this whole killing people things." And Pinochet is like, no, I'm gonna do what I want. I'm the leader of this country. I didn't kidnap those people. You can't produce the body. Then I'm free to go." Now, Pinochet, he didn't really know all that much about laws, but luckily enough for him, he was the leader of his country, so he could write his own laws. See, right here, I'm innocent. So in the 1990s, the UK actually arrests Pinochet for murder, but they're not able to actually do anything with him, so he's able to get back to Chile. And while there, in 2001, one of his generals comes out and he's like, "Yo, Pinochet was whack. I was lying when I told you guys that he was all good. He was bad dude." And after this, Pinochet actually ends up dying without any punishment. And nowadays in the country, it's still pretty bad. In 2015, 1,000 cases were brought up against Pinochet's people, and out of the 344 that punished, almost all of them, the Supreme Court said, "Nah, you're good. You can go home. We don't really care. What happens in the 70s stays in the 70s." So that's pretty bad on the Supreme Court. And not even then, but in 2005 to 2016, 850 kids and 448 adults died in prison. They just died. Meanwhile, police are breaking human rights left and right. And the way that the court system was set up, police were tried under military court. And the military court, they just gave the police a pass, a slap on the wrist. But in 2016, the president said he said to the military, "Yo, you can't be trying these police anymore. That's not under your jurisdiction. We're gonna have to try them in regular court." So this actually helped make Chile a much safer place, police-wise. And despite this ruling in 2016, in the first 9 months of 2016, there was a 193% increase in crimes against humanity as compared in the same time in 2015. So as you can see, it's not necessarily getting any better. As for relations with the United States and Chile, we're both in the UN.
United Nations.
We're both in the OAS.
Organization of American States.
We're in the World Bank together.
The World Bank.
We're in the WTO.
World Trade Organization.
And even today, we work on scientific projects together as countries. And in 2004, we signed a treaty that demanded free trade between us. And Chile is a part of the visa waiver program, where their citizens are allowed to come to the United States with for business and tourism without a visa, which shows how close our countries have grown.
So, looking back, how involved do you think the U.S. was in everything that happened in Chile?
I mean, I don't know. If you look at the whole, as a whole, if you were to take it from, no involvement to all involvement, I'd say that the U.S. is moderate. I mean, they tried to overthrow Allende just because he was socialist. So I mean, in that sense, we're kind of interfering with their government. Not to mention that the coup taken place by Pinochet, we kind of funded those guys before we knew it was a coup. So I guess you could say that we were involved, but it wasn't very direct. It was very indirect and accidental. The only part that would be, an impact would be the whole Kissinger thing, and how we never ended up saying anything. But other than that, I think it's pretty just moderate.
the story?
Moral of the story? I don't know. Don't kill your own people. Be good.
Good moral. Good morals.
To good morals.